Well, joining me now is Dan Connolly. He's covered Major League Baseball for a very long time, working for Sportsnaut as an insider as well. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Carolyn?
I'm good, thanks. So let's start with the postseason. Rob Manfred saying, we need patience here in the second year of a new format, and yet you've got a couple of division winners who are no longer in the postseason. One that struggled offensively and now is not in the postseason. Take the temperature for us. What do you think is working and not working?
Well, you have three teams who won more than 100 games for the regular season. They all got byes, and they ended up 1-9 in the playoffs. Okay? And they scored combined in those 10 games 25 runs. So obviously something's happening here. Obviously the hitter's timing is off from being off so long. I mean, 5 days is a forever time in Major League Baseball. The longest period of time not playing an actual game, starting from February, 24th or 25th when games begin in spring training, until October 1st or whatever. The only time they get any break is the All-Star game, which is 4 days. And here they're getting 5-day break. And I think the rust really shows. And I think it shows more with the hitters now because, it's all about timing. Baseball's all about timing. And so something has to be done. And I don't know what that is. And I don't know if Rob Manfred knows what it is. But I don't think that you're giving an advantage to these teams who win a bye. I think you're actually putting them at a disadvantage.
Is there enough pressure, do you think, on Manfred to make a decision sooner rather than later regarding how much time there is between the end of the regular season and the postseason?
Well, I think you do have to be a little patient. I mean, this is a small sample size. Maybe something just got wonky. We saw a little bit of it last year, a lot of it this year. But, I mean, I do think that something does need to be changed. Maybe eliminate that day off, that travel day between the wild card and the first game of the division series. That could potentially help. I covered the Baltimore Orioles, and Brandon Hyde was clamoring to get the bye. Like, they wanted the bye so badly to rest their bullpen. And then after they got it, they're like, wait a second, 5 days is too long. So, I mean, it's really a tough balance, and I think it's a tough balance to figure out what this is. I think baseball needs to be patient in a sense, but I think it's pretty obvious that bye is not helping the best teams.
Do you think, Dan, that it's just about scheduling and timing, or should there be some thought given to maybe rewarding some of these regular season teams somehow that have done so well the entire year? And then, that's what makes the postseason so great, I suppose, specifically in October with baseball, is that it's kind of anybody's day. But is there any way to incentivize teams for the success that they have during the regular season?
I mean, obviously they tried that with the bye and skipping around, but it's that timing that's the problem. Obviously, one of the things they could do is they could eliminate the 3-game series again for the wild card teams and make that 1-game series. That certainly gives them a bit of a cushion then, where maybe they're having 3 days off instead of 5 days off. The problem with that is, we know all sports is run by money and run by TV money, and it's pretty exciting to have those wild card games. I mean, I know I watched them all, I enjoyed them all, and I think that they did probably pretty well ratings wise. A lot of advertising dollars in there, and I think Manfred's hope was to have more teams in the playoffs, more excitement for the postseason. I think that's happened. I just think that it's difficult for the teams who go through this entire gauntlet of 162 games, play the best. You're talking about the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 best records in Major League Baseball this year are all out of the playoffs by the second round. And that seems, as cool as that is in one sense, that seems a little crazy.
How do the fans feel about it? I mean, if you're a Braves fan this morning, what are you waking up feeling?
Terrible. You're waking up with a horrible hangover because it was such a great season, 104 wins in a difficult division. It's difficult. The Orioles fans, they won 101 games for the first time since they won 100 or more for the first time since 1980. Okay, and they're riding this wave, and they lose 2 games, at home, and then go on the road, lose a third. This Orioles team had not been swept since May of 2022, and it got swept in the playoffs in 3 games. So that's a terrible feeling for those fans and for Dodgers fans. And I think, again, it's baseball, and it's the beauty of baseball because any team can beat any team, and suddenly you have the Arizona Diamondbacks, having a chance at the World Series. That's great. That's fun. But at the same time, it seems like it's almost wiping out the importance of the regular season.
Dodgers fans have tasted success. They're obviously disappointed with the way that this postseason ended. Baltimore, you really get the sense that the fan base, and you know it more than I do, is so desperate for, a World Series title, to finally see all of this hard work and really some of these young players in the farm system that have been developed, to see that all kind of pay off. How devastating is it to have so much excitement around the Orioles and what they've done with some of these younger players, to see that come up short?
It was pretty devastating. I mean, when I walked out of Camden Yards after Game 2 and they lost 2 straight and happened to go to Texas, people were deflated. The players were deflated. The fans were deflated. And I think the one thing that saves the Orioles, maybe in comparison to, say, the Dodgers, is this team is definitely on the upswing. There's no question. They won 52 games in 2021. In 2022, they won 83 for a 31-win jump. And then they win 101 this year. So the trend is definitely going up. They have a lot of young players. Their best players are 25, 23, 22 years old. So I feel like that although the Orioles fans are really disappointed, they also feel like next year, they'll be good again and they'll have a chance here. You can't guarantee anything, but they certainly have a better chance, to maybe continue going upwards than, say, a Dodgers team.
Do they need any other pieces, Dan, or are they just in position to continue to improve upon the success and potentially finally break through next year?
It's funny you said that, Carolyn. For Sportsnaut, I wrote yesterday, we had the post-mortem conference with Mike Elias and Brandon Hyde. And the one thing that comes out of that, they need a top-of-the-rotation starter. They just do. They have a lot of good young pitchers. Kyle Bradish could develop into a number 1 starter. Grayson Rodriguez could develop into a number 1 starter. But they need a guy that's at the top of the rotation that they can look to, if they're in a losing streak, if they need something to turn around, a guy who can dominate in the playoffs. And the Orioles' 3 starters in the playoffs, I think they combined for 8 innings. And that's tough to be able to. And now, again, you can't take away from the Texas Rangers offense, which is fantastic. But you need a guy atop that rotation. If they get a guy who is a number 1, a true number 1, or close to a number 1, this team could be really formidable for several years.
How should baseball fans, or even casual fans, Dan, feel about what Houston has done?
I mean, I think you got to sit back and just appreciate it now. I mean, 7 straight times into the American League Championship Series, that is really, really hard to do. And I know people are going to go back to the trash cans and everything else, but they had a plan, they built that plan, and they've been able to sustain that. And the most difficult thing in sports is to sustain excellence. And 7 straight trips to the ALCS, and possibly, I mean, they're the favorites to go to the World Series now. I mean, that's really hard to do. So I know there's a lot of people who don't like the Astros. I know there's a lot of new Rangers fans out there after the Astros made the playoffs here. But I think as a reporter and also as a baseball fan, I think you just got to tip your cap to them, because they're so good and they've been so steady. And it's interesting because Mike Elias, who has rebuilt this Orioles organization, he came from Houston, and he basically used the entire blueprint that the Astros put together to use it for the Orioles.
And walk us through what what the identity of this Rangers team has been and how they've been able to do what they've done.
Carolyn, they crush the ball. I don't know how much you've had a chance to see. Their offense is so good. It is so deep. They have 3 absolute superstars offensively. And then they added Evan Carter, who is, this 21-year-old kid who comes in and has been really, really good for them. Has a great eye, takes a lot of walks. And all they have to do is keep their opponents to 4 or 5 runs, and they should win most games. I mean, they can score at will. And they just have such a tremendous offense. And their starting pitching, I mean, it's no joke. They had Jordan Zimmerman. They have Nate Eovaldi, who's pitched as well as he's pitched in years. And, there's this guy, Max Scherzer, you might have heard of. Maybe he might end up being in the rotation. So they're a real dangerous team. The one problem with them, Carolyn, in my opinion anyway, the bullpen is still shaky. The Orioles didn't really get to that bullpen when it mattered. But I think that's going to be a concern for them when they get to Houston, because that bullpen is still concerning.
Who do you think has the edge heading into this season? You mentioned the bullpen, and Baltimore may be learning something about themselves after facing such a formidable team offensively. When you look at this matchup, who do you think has the advantage, and what do you think the X factor will be?
With Houston and Texas?
Yes.
I think it's got to be Houston because the X factor is the experience. They know what to do. They've gotten here. I mean, obviously you have guys, on Texas individually that have made playoffs, but for a team that has pretty much done it together the way Houston is, and the other X factor is Houston, Justin Verlander. I mean, Framber Valdez is a really good pitcher, but you put Justin Verlander in there, he is a Hall of Fame ace. He's one of the best we've seen in 30 years, and he wants to win so badly. I think putting him in there, I think that was the biggest move at the trade deadline. The only one that was possibly close was Montgomery for Texas. That was absolutely huge for them too because of the way he's pitched. But putting Verlander back, I talked to Verlander like the week after he joined the Astros again, and it was just a perfect fit for him. He just felt like he was just coming back and he was just going to redo what they did last year. And so I think they have to have the edge.
It's unbelievable to see him sort of right back in the mix with Houston, living in New York and watching how everything transpired here, Dan. What else did he tell you about that move that came at the deadline that shifted everything? And I guess how fortunate he feels to maybe be in this position again.
One of the interesting things that he said to me, I thought, was that he would have gone to other places. Like once he had everything worked out with the Mets, then he was open to go to a contender, and it didn't necessarily mean Houston. And I know the Orioles actually had some interest in him, and I'm sure pretty much every team had interest in him that was a contender. It worked for Houston, and he was very excited to go back. But it kind of interests me, what would some of these other teams look like if Justin Verlander were on them? I mean, if the Orioles had Justin Verlander, they would have been a much different team. And some of these other teams as well. I mean, could you imagine if the Phillies could have swung something and had the two guys they have, Wheeler and Nola, and threw Verlander in there, and Ranger Suarez as a fourth guy? The Phillies would, I'm not sure anybody would touch them going to the World Series. Although I'm not sure anybody's going to touch the Phillies now, Carolyn. That's my team to win it all at this point.
I'm thinking about what Mets fans must be feeling, honestly, in this offseason. I mean, talk about a complete dumpster fire, and then to see these guys in other places having this success. What are your takeaways from watching this series with Philadelphia, and what chance do you give them of potentially getting this done?
Yeah, they're my favorite at this point because honestly, I thought they in the National League were the second best team. I thought the Braves were going to win it all. I just thought they were so deep and so put together. But I wrote in my first column for Sportsnaut about the previews that I believe that the Phillies were just kind of like just lying in the grass there waiting. I mean, they were really good, but it didn't seem like they had put it all together yet. But we saw what they did last year on the run, and it almost seemed like they were like, all right, Braves got ahead of us. We're going to let them do their thing. We're going to knock them off when we get a chance. And they did it. And they did it so like systematically. I mean, they just they hit the home runs. They pitched great. Their bullpen last night in particular was fantastic. I mean, they just are going on all cylinders, and they have the experience from last year as well. They also have superstars. I mean, what the attaboy Harper. I mean, what Bryce is doing is tremendous. And Castellanos, 4 home runs in 2 days. And the thing about that team is they're passing the baton. They have a star every night. They have a guy who can step up every single night, and that's what you need in the playoffs.
Yeah, how important is that depth? And what I like about them too, Dan, is they are playing with a sort of confidence or a bravado where it seems like they expected to be here. I mean, they're not surprising anybody, but like you said, maybe being patient, lying in wait, knowing the amount of talent that they have on the roster, and now you really get the sense that they are not done.
If you have Bryce Harper on your team, you play with bravado. That's just the way it is, right? And you throw Schwarber in there or Castellanos in there. I mean, they have that. They brim with confidence. They're oozing with it, and I feel like that's not only are they confident, but they're really good. I mean, they have Trey Turner. I mean, we don't even think about Trey Turner, and Bryson Stott has been fantastic for that team. Alex Bohm has been struggling, but he could break out of it at any point. And then you have those 3 pitchers. If Suarez does what Suarez has done, that are as good as any pitchers. And that bullpen last night, it was just a clinic, both in how Thompson handled it and how those guys produced.
It was so exciting to watch. I mean, that final pitch and just watching the team ecstatic and also kind of systematically on to the next sort of thing. I mean, what do they need to do to be successful in this next series?
Just not get ahead of themselves, not look over the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks aren't nearly as talented as the Phillies, But those teams can, those teams can shock you, as the Diamondbacks did with the Dodgers. They can't overlook them. I mean, the Diamondbacks have two exceptionally good pitchers as well. Where they kind of fall is who will face Suarez, and will it be Brandon Pfaadt? I don't know. That's the way it's gone. But they have in Kelly and Gallen, they have two of the better pitchers in the National League, and Corbin Carroll is a delight to watch. He's as good as they come, offensively, defensively, on the base paths. So they can be dangerous. The Phillies just can't overlook them. They can't just assume they're in the World Series again. They have to play exactly how they played against the Braves, and they shouldn't be touched.
Is that what the Dodgers did? Did they overlook Arizona?
Partially, and I think partially is we're so used, Carolyn, to how great the Dodgers pitching staff is, and it just isn't this year. I mean, look at the guys that they lost. Whether you lose a Dustin May, obviously Urias' situation took him out of the playoffs. Clayton Kershaw's hurt. I mean, he's trying to pitch through it. He's a gamer, but he was trying to pitch through it. He's hurt. Bobby Miller's a rookie. I mean, it's you look at that starting staff, and they're just not what they used to be. I mean, Lance Lynn, is a nice veteran, but he's not that strike fear in you Dodgers kind of pitcher like they had. And I think that it was a combination of maybe they overlooked the Diamondbacks a little bit. They had beaten them, I think, 8 of 13 in the regular season. But I think also their pitching just wasn't that good, and the Diamondbacks seized on that.
What do you think the Dodgers need to focus on this offseason?
Well, they have to bring in another pitcher. I think they know that. I think that's what their strength has been. May's going to be out for most of the year. Buehler should be back, I believe. I'm not even sure about that situation, but I believe so. I mean, he was trying to make it back. So, I mean, they obviously have some talent there. Who knows what the Urias situation is? His career may be done, for that matter. So, they have to get at least one, or if not two, starting pitchers, and they will, because they spend money, and because it's a great place to pitch, it's a great place to play. So I think they'll probably end up with that. But if you look at the guys that they had, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and now you look at what their rotation is, it's a completely different thing.
And just lastly for you, Dan, sorry, I'm just trying to get this clear out of the way. If it is Philly-Houston, if things sort of go to plan and these two teams execute the way that they're capable of executing, who do you give the World Series edge to between those two?
I give it to the Phillies. I just think they're a really complete team. I mean, you never discount the Astros. You don't discount Dusty. That's a really, that's a team that knows how to win. And again, I'm not going to discount unfortunately, I'm not giving a lot of love to the Diamondbacks, but the Rangers, I mean, they just absolutely destroyed the Orioles in that series. They kind of embarrassed. They beat them in a one-run game, then they clobbered them and were basically won the game in the second inning the next two nights. So that Rangers team, I'm not going to discount, but I do think the Astros are the better of the two teams. Would not be surprised if the Rangers emerge, but once whatever team gets to Philly and playing in Philadelphia, which is really difficult to do, as we saw, I just think the Phillies are your World Series champions. They just look that good to me.
And what's the most interesting remaining storyline, do you think, out of these last four standing heading into the World Series?
That's a good question. I think maybe it is just if Philadelphia can kind of build on what they did last year. That place, like I said, is electric. I've spent a lot of time in Philadelphia, and I think maybe, if they get it, they get the World Series again. I think it would be really interesting if it's Philadelphia-Houston. I mean, I know that's kind of boring in one sense, because we've seen that, we've done that, but I think it would be kind of interesting to see how it plays out this year. And but Houston, I mean, I'm telling you, the one thing that I'm a little concerned about, that Texas Rangers offense is about as good as I've seen, and if they can keep going, they could. I mean, that would be a really interesting series between Philadelphia and Houston, especially if, Philadelphia and Texas, especially if, and here's my storyline, if Max Scherzer is Max Scherzer and can come back, from that injury and be in the World Series. That would be a lot of fun, Carolyn.
What an incredible year capper that would be for Max Scherzer to end up pitching in the World Series. Dan Connolly, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it. Best of luck to you moving forward in the championship series and beyond. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.